Mike Brown wants this team to be super solid defensively. You've seen him be hard on guys, challenge guys. You've seen practice videos leak of him chewing guys out and having this really fiery focus on the defensive end that seems totally upgraded. Now, granted, I don't think there were a lot of leaked videos of practice last season, but I think before the first game of the season, the reporters caught wind of a Mike Brown chew out session that they hadn't heard before. And so there's like an added emphasis there. But is it sustainable to expect them to keep that? I mean, we've talked about it a lot. Mike Brown was saying it in reference to Kevin Huerter and others in training camp when he was struggling. You know, the defensive struggles were a pretty big topic, but, you know, kind of adding into it was the fact that his shooting was off. And you heard Mike Brown say, well, it's like when you're adding that added emphasis on defense, it changes the offense. It changes the level of difficulty of shots. Usually ones that you hit are harder to hit and all that.
When you are playing that much harder defensively, and you know your physicality is increased, and your intensity, like I just said, it's a different shot on the other end of the floor. It just is.
And I think you've heard a couple other players kind of comment on that as well, and it does kind of raise the question where it's like, you know, maybe they can get to that level. And yeah, it's good to face this adversity early. But a lot of people are asking whether or not that's even sustainable. Because it's like if you get up to a mid-level defensive team in terms of defensive rankings, but then you knock yourself down offensively to a mid-level offensive team, are you getting better?
I think adding defense will take them to that next level, right? Into not just like a playoff team, but a championship contending team. But I don't know. It's kind of weird. Because you want them to be better defensively, but you don't want them to lose too much offensively. That's just such a big part of their identity and what has made them a good team. And just switching that up so much, it can just be detrimental. I remember when Jaeger had the Kings, he had that good year. They were just, you know, a very high-paced team. I think they led the league in pace, scored a lot. I mean, they're nicknamed the Scorers for a reason. And then they fire Jaeger and bring in Walton, and Walton slowed down the pace and wanted to focus more on defense, which is, you know, not a bad idea. But I mean, I don't know. Sometimes you just have to chip at it a little instead of just going like full force into it. Like once you just go from an offensive to a defensive team, I mean, you're just changing up the team's whole identity and what they're used to. And you're just taking away what made them succeed, right?
When you think about the Warriors and when Steve Kerr took over, I mean, they were already pretty solid defensively. I mean, they had Andre Iguodala. They had, you know, Mark Jackson laying the groundwork there. He started with defense. There wasn't as much of a jump to make defensively, I guess is what I'm saying. So I think it's fair to bring up that it's like, yeah, maybe you are trying to reach something that's unachievable given this roster. But you saw it in the playoffs. It's like, and Mike Brown said this a lot, it's like it's a make or miss league. You're going to have games where you miss shots. But again, what always keeps you in games is defense. So it's like, it's hard to be like, well, no, they should just kind of like not worry too much about it. Because it's just like, if you do that, then it's like you're kind of just residing in being a playoff team that doesn't really ever make any deep runs, you know? You're kind of like resting on that and kind of being okay with that. Mm-hmm. You do kind of have to swing for the fences to be a championship team in this league. And they have the players to pull that. I don't think the roster is necessarily set to be defensive right now, but they definitely have the potential to be that while still also having a great offense. You kind of have to take that chance in my mind, you know? And also it's just like, I mean, to make Fox the model and the saint that he kind of is on this team, it's just like, he's really embraced the two-way role, you know, extremely well. Obviously, you'd like to see a full season from him and see how that kind of works out. But if anybody's been passing with flying colors in terms of performing on both ends of the floor throughout a game, it's him. And it's just like, you have to try to get that out of the guys. But I mean, it is screwing with things because this team used to play with a sense of pace, both in the full and half court, that you just saw completely, you saw the wheels fall off in that regard, you know, in these last two games. There's just so much, they were pressing on both ends of the floor, and all of a sudden it just felt like, you know, everything just came apart. So, I mean, it's just, it's a weird balance that you have to mix out. And I think there's a lot for Mike Brown to think about there because, I mean, what you saw in Houston is just like, that's a team that just, that can't necessarily handle that load. And that's like 99% of the team right there.
Yeah. Well, I
That's
mean,
12 out of 14 guys, not including
exactly.
Lyles, obviously.
And you said something earlier, like, is this roster cut out to be the top 15 defensive team? I mean, you brought up the Warriors, and the Warriors also had, good defensive players that I don't know if anyone can live up to on the Kings. I mean, they had Klay Thompson, they had Andre Iguodala, they had Draymond Green, they had Andrew Bogut. I mean, those are all defensive-minded players. I don't think the Kings have anyone like that. I mean, who's the Kings' best two-way player other than Fox? I just don't think the Kings have those defensive players. And I think that's just something that's going to be a personnel issue, really. I mean, Fox has it. Even Sabonis. I think Sabonis is an underrated defender, like we've talked about a lot. But shoot, other than that, I mean, I don't see anyone bringing it on both ends like a two-way player would.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say probably the only other real true two-way player outside of Fox is Chris Duarte. And
yes, yeah, that's true.
But again, now you're not talking about one of your top 5 best players being a two-way player,
Mm-hmm.
and not having a Draymond Green and an Andre Iguodala, guys that are long that can guard multiple positions. That's a huge hole if you're talking about trying to replicate or at least imitate something that was done. I mean, that is a huge personnel hole. So, yeah, I mean, again, it's like about finding that balance. Because I don't think Mike Brown should let up on defense. I don't think anybody's necessarily saying that. But it's like, you do have to realize what you're working with here. And you might not have the roster to do that. So it's just like, is Mike Brown pressing too hard on things just to try to make them an average defensive team? I mean that's up to Mike Brown at this point, but I think the high standard on top of what seems to be lacking personnel wise, that's a huge wall in terms of getting to the place they want to be. Again, I don't know if Mike Brown's philosophy is wrong, but the route to getting there, he might be hitting the gas a little too hard. It might be a steeper hill than he maybe is thinking in terms of the roster and whatnot.